Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is having a fabulous day. Today I thought I would bring you an activity that I used as an art lesson for the Gate Academy students at our school. I am not a teacher by any means or by profession, but our Gate Academy teachers do ask parents, community members, different business owners or hobbyists, people with different skill sets or unique professions to come and just give a little lesson to the kids to just enrich their knowledge about life and about different subjects or different activities, and just to kind of broaden their horizons a bit and to expose them to peoples and subjects and things that they might not necessarily learn in a traditional classroom due to time constraints or resource constraints or whatever. So since my specific skill set is arts and crafts, the teachers had asked me if I would do a scissor specific, like cutting specific activity for the kids, because scissor skills is something that is so important for all students, and it does really enhance and support all other aspects of education and skill. So it is something that kids need to practice, but don't really get to practice that much in the classroom. So I chose the artist Henri Matisse, who started out as a painter, but in his later life turned to collage as his medium due to an illness that he had. And so I found this children's book called Henri's Scissors by Jeanette Winter, and there are actually a lot of children's books based on Henri Matisse that just basically they're biographies, but they're written in a children's book format, so it's easy for kids to read and understand. And this one is great because it has a lot of really beautiful pictures of Henri and his life, and it also has some examples of his real life artwork that you can see, and it's just a wonderful book. But like I said, there are lots of wonderful books about Henri Matisse, and so what we did is we started off by reading this book so that the kids could have a little bit of a background as to what we were doing, and our end project was this collage that each child made their own. So the unique thing about our Gate Academy, unique or challenging I guess depending upon how you see it, is that I had children ranging from 2nd grade all the way up to 6th grade, so I really had to think about how I was going to incorporate all the different skill levels and all the different age levels and make sure everyone was having fun and not getting frustrated or bored, because obviously a 2nd grader is not going to have the same skills as a 6th grader, and what's easy and fun for a 6th grader could be difficult and frustrating for a 2nd or 3rd grader. So how I did that is I made this giant chart, and this idea and this activity is something that I initially saw on Pinterest, just Henri Matisse collage activities. If you Google that or search on Pinterest, there's a lot of different ones, and this chart idea is something that I took off of there, but I made it my own, and I kind of expanded it to be to work for my classroom situation. So on the top, I cut out the words roll a shape, and then on the side here, I put the size of a die, and I cut all these out because obviously it's a cutting activity, so I wanted to be authentic to the process. And so I had several students come up and just roll a die, and whatever number they landed on, they had to choose to cut out a shape from that column or that row. And they weren't allowed to draw first. They had to cut it out organically from the paper. And so to accommodate all the different skills and abilities, I started off in this column with like the most simple shapes. So that way a student who didn't really have as much skills could just pick from the simple shape. And then as you go across the chart, the shapes get more complex and more abstract. And so that way, if little Johnny rolls a 1, then the whole class has options to cut something from this row. And I also tried to build upon the initial shape, so that, for example, for this one, we start off with an oval, which is easier to cut than a circle, because a circle has to be symmetrical, but an oval doesn't have to be symmetrical on all sides. So an oval is pretty easy, and then we graduate to a blob, which is the same curving cutting motion, but a blob is a blob, so you can kind of just cut it however you like. And then we graduate to a cloud, which is a more defined shape, but at the same time, each cloud is different. So, and each part of the cloud is a little bit different. So it is a more defined shape than a blob, but it's not as symmetrical as a flower, say, because a flower has to be symmetrical on both sides. So that's kind of that was my thought process in making this grid. I also tried to encourage the kids to combine shapes, to make different shapes. So, 2 rectangles could make an X, 2 triangles could make a bow tie. A semicircle and a triangle could be a sailboat. It could be a gnome. It could be an ice cream cone if you, turn it upside down. So that's also something that I created. And then the bottom one, which was the most difficult, the bottom row, if you rolled a 6, you had to choose from a letter, any type of letter you want. And if you think about it, there are letters that are easier to cut out than others. Obviously, a T or an L or, a D is a little bit easier to cut out than, say, an R or a Z or something, or a number, and then a crescent and a spiral, which is I think the hardest one, even for myself now. So that is how I incorporated all the different ages and skill levels, and it worked out really well because everybody had a choice. Everybody had a shape that they could cut out for themselves at their level, and it worked out well for everyone to have a good time. And then so whenever somebody rolled a number, they chose a shape, and they were allowed to glue it in any fashion on their paper. And a really great thing I always find when I do these kind of just creative art activities with kids, and creative, by creative I mean not like a directed drawing where everybody has to draw a line here and draw a line there, but something that they can really kind of just do on their own and be creative with it, is that there are always kids who advance very quickly. So then there were kids who were like, hey, can I use the frame of my shape to glue on my paper? Like, yes, I cut out a circle, but now I have this frame of a circle. Can I glue that on my shape? Or can I make a staircase with a zigzag on one side and just straight lines in the other? And so I find it always fascinating and really fun to discover those kids who you can tell have more artistic ability and who have more creativity and who view the world in a little bit of a different perspective. So that was really fun to figure out and to do. And so this activity did take a good hour, but we did also have, I think, about 40 students. So we did have a lot of students, but it did take a good hour because cutting actually is pretty difficult. I know in classrooms usually you're just like cutting out rectangles or cutting out simple lines and shapes, but when you get a little bit more abstract, it does take a little bit more time, and if you have a big class, then it'll take a lot more time. So this activity did take a full hour. We did give each student a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, but if you want to do this for your class and you don't have that much time, maybe just give them half a sheet of paper, or maybe put them in groups and say, okay, you guys cut out these shapes and you guys cut out these shapes, and maybe they can do a group collage, and that would be a really fun idea. And so yeah, the chart that I made is something that you don't have to obviously make it yourself and cut out all the pieces. You can just draw it out on a piece of paper or on the whiteboard, or print them out on a computer so that each table could have one. So there are lots of different options as to what you can do. And then so the last thing I wanted to do, I don't think I'll make a collage because it's pretty self-explanatory and I showed you the sample, but I did want to show you how I usually cut out a spiral, and this part is something that I did teach the kids how to do. So first you start off with the circle, and I find that when you cut circles, instead of doing this motion all the way around, because if you do that motion, it kind of ends up, you kind of end up with just like jagged edges. When I usually cut a circle, I feed the paper into the blade and I rotate the paper into the blade, and not so much doing this around the paper. And I find that when I just rotate the paper, since the blade is sharp anyways, it does cut pretty cleanly and evenly, and then you get a nice rounded circle in the end. So obviously it's not perfect, but it's pretty good, right? I've been practicing a long time. So first you start out with the circle, such as this, and then you make a little slit. And the longer you make the slit, the less rings it'll have. So don't make the slit too long. So this is probably a 3-inch circle, and my cut is probably 3/4 of an inch, right? So you make a little slit, and then you start at the top of your slit, and then you cut in circles again. So I'm just rotating the paper. And notice as I'm cutting, I am creating a spiral, right? I'm creating the spiral as I'm cutting. So as you cut, you will be able to see and gauge how your spiral will be. And then when you get to the center, do cut off that little piece so that you have the void here in the middle. And so right now it is a spiral, but it doesn't have any negative space, and you have this like weird random slit here, right? So how to remedy that is, now you start from the center, right? You start from the center of your spiral, and you're going to basically trim away the small portion of the entire spiral. And also by feeding the paper into the blade, you can kind of make it more even, because basically you're just turning it, so the width is kind of staying the same. So I started from the center, and I'm just cutting all the way. See? And there you go. It's a little spiral. And actually you end up with 2 spirals because you end up with the outside layer one too. And this one, even though it has like a chubby thing, you can just trim it off. And then now you have 2 spirals. So 1 and 2. And surprisingly, especially the older kids did understand this concept, and some of them were able to cut out a spiral on their own. It is something that takes a little bit of practice, and I've had years and years of practice, but it's something fun and decorative and useful. So I'll show you again. Start off with a circle like that, cut a little slit, and then you rotate the paper around, being conscious of the width of your spiral. And then you just cut off that little bit right there. And then to create the negative space of the spiral, you start from the inside of the spiral, and then you feed the paper in the blade and rotate all the way around until you get to the end. And there you go. Spiral number 2. So it's just something that takes a lot of practice, and there have been many times I've cut off random sections and I'm like, oh no, and then you have to do it again. But it's just something that takes time, and practice. But once you get it, it's pretty easy. And I think something that's as difficult as like a spiral is like a really great accomplishment for kids, and they're like, hey, I did it, you know. So maybe if I had this spiral, you know, on my collage, maybe I could, you know, glue it on here, give it a little bit more dimension, maybe glue it off to the side or something, you know. So just, you know, things like that that kind of enhance creativity and enhance the fun of abstract art. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, I guess, tutorial lesson, and I hope you have a chance to do it with the children in your life. And thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.